Hi everyone, this week we've got Lucy on the show and we're going to be talking about agency sales and how do you know when it's the good time to sell. So Lucy, before we do anything, can we have a quick introduction from you, please?
Yeah, so I'm Lucy. I founded Atomic Consultancy just over a year ago. We've just completed on our 50th transaction in a year, so really excited about that. And then, but been in the industry over 20 years. For the last 8 years, I was a buyer working for some of the main corporates. So launched last year to help support independent agents to grow via acquisition and also support people's exit strategies.
Wicked. Congratulations on the 50th, Lucy. That's great news. My first question for you is, how does an agency know the time is right to sell?
I think there's various different ways. I think it's definitely changed. I think recently, most of the reasons why people look to exit is retirement. So a lot of people do look to retire. We are seeing that has changed quite a lot, particularly since COVID. People's circumstances have changed. They've reflected and said, do you know what? I'm really passionate in estate agency, not so much in lettings or vice versa. So they've sold an element of their business to focus on what they're passionate about. So I think there's lots of different reasons as to why people look to sell their business. And also, you know, unfortunately, the economies of scale of having a small independent business is actually quite difficult. So that is why you're seeing quite a lot of consolidation in the market, because staffing salaries are higher, supplier contracts are higher. So actually, the more cost involved in the business to be profitable, you've got to be of a certain scale. So again, a lot of smaller agencies, I think, have been struggling a little bit more than they would have done a few years ago.
Awesome. And Lucy, I want to ask you about, what does an agency need to know to ensure the business is in a good position to sell? So you've got, obviously, how do you know the right time? How do you put it in a good position?
Yeah, so I mean, really, you should be looking at about 3 years before you're looking to sell to start your exit strategy. My first real tip is to go and speak to your accountant. Make sure your business is structured in the right way. So having things like just your turnover, what does that actually include? So you need to be able to break down your numbers and know your numbers. So know what your estate agency income is, know what your lettings income is, and break it down, your lettings income. What is let only? What is fully managed? What is rent collect? What other ancillary fees do I have? And track that. The golden nugget, particularly in lettings, is you're fully managed. So if you are doing a lot of setup costs, you're charging for inventories, really start to increase your management fee to make sure that you managed income, because that is your consistent income and that is where the value of your business will be. So speak to your accountant, get that structured, get your management accounts in order. Secondly, do some reverse due diligence on your business. So there's some great suppliers out there that can go in and look and make sure that you're compliant, and make sure that you're ship shape and shiny. You know, then entering into that sale process, that it's going to be a lot simpler, and you know that you've got a really good business. So I'd do some reverse due diligence from a compliance perspective. And then probably lastly as well is I'd just get a list of your direct debits and just really look at what your commercial contracts are. Have you got a long lease left on the premises? You know, have you got your company cut your own car in there, your mobile phone in there? You know, what do you want to sell and what don't you want to? And start thinking about how you're going to move that out. But don't sign up to really big printer contracts, phone, things like that, because ultimately that will affect the value. But you need to, you know, make sure that you've got as limited amount of cost as possible, and you're maximising all of the income streams that you've got in order to sell for the best price.
Wicked, Lucy. I think it's really interesting what you're saying about the 3 years before. I wouldn't have thought of that. You know, to look at it that far in advance. I think that's a great tip.
Yeah, no, I mean, don't get me wrong, some people can sell straight away. It depends on everyone's different situation. But really, as a buyer, we always ask for 3 years worth of accounts. So if we can make sure that we can see your accounts and it's been consistent, then from a buyer's perspective, it just it allows that continuity, and we can see it in a more robust way.
Wicked. My last question for you: What do you see as the biggest challenge facing agents at the moment?
So I think there's a lot of scaremongering going on. So, you know, I've been through a recession before in my career in the estate agency industry. And I think a lot of people I've seen over the last few weeks have looking to panic sell. They're worried about interest rates. Yes, it is becoming more difficult for independent agents to acquire because it's funding. So it's the demand has definitely not dropped. But actually getting funding to acquire a business has become more challenging, but not impossible. So again, the estate agency value has fallen off a cliff because funders won't fund, unfortunately, in pure estate agency business currently, unless there's a huge long earn out. But they will still fund on lettings, but you may have to pay a little bit more in interest for the benefit of that. But I think one of the things that I am seeing is some sellers are looking to panic selling. So some people are not using someone like an organisation like myself. You wouldn't sell your house to your next door neighbour if they just come knocking on your door. And I think, you know, you really need to make sure it's exactly the same as your business. Don't just sell to one person that's giving you an offer. You know, work with someone like us that will be able to value it in the right way, but also approach the right buyers and generate that interest and maximise your sale price. And ultimately as well, it's not just about the price, it's about finding the right business that aligns with your culture, because you'll never get 100% of the purchase price up front. They'll always keep some money back to make sure that what they've bought is there. So actually, if you sell to a business that you genuinely don't think your staff are going to stay and all your landlords are going to go, then actually by accepting an extra 20,000, is that actually a benefit? Because actually you might not get the 50 grand of deferred consideration that you've had. So it's all of that. And, you know, if you've never sold a business before, it's complicated. So I am seeing a few people at the few businesses in the industry at the moment that have panic sold. And I'm like thinking, if you'd have come to me, you would have got another 100,000, you know, quite significant amounts of money. But, you know, there's still a huge demand for businesses. So I really would urge people, yes, we're going into a turbulent time, but don't panic sell would be my advice.
Lucy, I think that's fantastic advice, and thank you so much for your comments, and thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
No worries.